I'm going to talk in this video about something extremely important nowadays and relevant. So it's media manipulation, and there are two parts basically of this video. But before that, I mean two parts of the main topic. First is first are actually three videos, which each of them contains a footage of interrogation and then murder. Well, actually, this one doesn't contain the part with murder of a Serbian soldier in during the war in Bosnia, in Herzegovina, in the 90s. So I will show the levels of manipulation. First is Western media, Sky News. Second is state Serbian television, which is under Komi or communist control. So they hide some parts too. And the last one is independent journalist, where everything is shown. Everything that's relevant is shown. So not the murder of that poor guy, but what happened after that. So it is shown that he was murdered by basically hitting his head. Somebody was hitting his head against the rock. So this is the only video I found with that complete footage. So again, it might be surprising that state television, which is funded by taxpayers' money, is hiding this. And of course, another thing is that they created this in 2018. So 2018, like it's war was in 1995, so they waited for a long time to. So the war was in around 1995, so they waited so long to create this video. This should have been created a long time ago. I mean, they had those videos in practically in the time when they are recorded. So the second part of that video, again, manipulation of the media, and this is basically, let me see what's the some children are screaming outside. So this is a Truth in Journalism project, but as I will show, they did this really poorly, because I'm going to compare their work to work of some other journalists. This is Avoidable War documentary, probably the most detailed documentary on what happened in former Yugoslavia, on the media manipulation, and I mean manipulation of the politicians and so on, foreign officials, etc. So there are 18 parts of this movie, and I will play two parts of this documentary and compare those parts to this other documentary, and it will be obvious after that this is just a rip-off of this documentary. I mean, having less than a half an hour documentary on such a important and complex topic is I mean, it's not serious. And the guy who posted this guy is a Serbian historian, and I don't think that he changed this or edited this in any way. And then I will also just briefly show another movie. I think this is German, so not probably, but I'm sure that this is created by independent German journalists or journalist. So I will briefly go over it. This is focused on what happened during the war, civil war in Kosovo and Metohija. So not Kosovo, but Kosovo and Metohija. You cannot change the name of the country. It doesn't work like that. I'm sorry, but fortunately, it doesn't work like that. Okay, so and after that, I will also show one excellent, although short, documentary. This is like 45 minutes or something like that. Something less than 45 minutes. This is work of Russell Gordon. He was researching the media manipulation of Balkan wars. There are a lot of really important pieces of information here, and then I will wrap up with this, with one article which is related to one part of this documentary. So but before I start, I need some introduction why I'm actually doing this. Why is this so important? As I said, this is extremely important. So this video, sorry. I'm talking all the time about documentaries. So this video is primarily for people who were supporting illegal war against Serbs during the 90s. So that was all illegal. Foreign military was involved, which is illegal. They were supporting Bosnian Muslims and Croatians, or Kurbats. They are actually Asian tribe called Kurbats, who mixed with natives here from Balkans. And the people who were supporting, who supported that illegal war, the satanization and demonization of Serbs. So they are now experiencing the same thing by the same media. So the same media which was spinning those information and manipulating information to show Serbs as the only one who are responsible. Although I showed in my other videos that the one who was controlling all those so-called war crimes supposedly committed by Serbs is state intelligence of Serbia or Yugoslavia, and it is now official fact that the top of that intelligence was controlled by CIA. I mean, this is information from a trial from Hague. So the guy who was presenting those facts is the hotshot. I mean, this guy is major deal. He's a former ambassador Ivor Roberts of UK during the Milosevic era in Belgrade. So former ambassador of UK in Belgrade. So he stated that in during the trial of two major people of that intelligence, state intelligence of Serbia or Yugoslavia during the Milosevic era. So Serbs cannot really be blamed on that. And of course I will create another videos about that. So those people who were who supported that, they knew nothing about what really happened, because I know a lot of intellectuals from the best Western European countries, and they all know what happened. None of them was against the Serbs. So they are now experiencing the same thing, those people, and unfortunately some other people. But anyways, so first case where they are still experiencing that, they experienced that and they're still experiencing that, is the Abstinence Scandal, because most of the victims, so those were children, not young girls, not young women, like most of the media is talking about, and this monster and piece of shit Alan Dershowitz is constantly saying young women, they are not women. So the media was there was a huge cover-up of the media, by the media, during the whole time when that was happening. So it started in early 90s, not in 10 years after that, so not in early 200s. And they are still hiding those information about what really happened. And the best example is first Amy Robach. The ABC still refuses to air that interview from I think 2015, and I will just play a part for people who don't know what I'm talking about.
I've had the story for 3 years. I've had this interview with Virginia Roberts. We would not put it on the air. First of all, I was told, who's Jeffrey Epstein? No one knows who that is. This is a stupid story. Then the palace found out that we had her whole allegations about Prince Andrew and threatened us a million different ways.
Okay, so they still refuse to, ABC still refuses to air that interview. So she's, this lady is a journalist of ABC News, and as you heard, palace, so Britain's palace is mentioned. Who knows, who is following what's happening with the Epstein case knows what this is all about. The other thing that they are hiding is about Maria Farmer. She was the first known victim of Jeffrey Epstein. So not Epstein, but Epstein. And her sister Annie was also a victim of Jeffrey Epstein. So she was in hiding for 20 years. And I think during all that time, she was threatened by phone by Ghislaine Maxwell, when she stopped threatening her in 2015. So because she reported Jeffrey Epstein on trafficking, child trafficking, sex, that was a sex ring, and FBI knew, so she reported that to FBI in 1996. so 1996, and they obviously knew where she is. They found her. It was like 10 years after she reported that. They refused to give her any sort of protection. So they let that monster and faker and psychopath Ghislaine Maxwell threatening that she will be murdered for 10 years. Okay, so this is one of the, I think, the most comprehensive as far as I know. She also had so Maria Farmer also had a interview with True News, but I wasn't able to find it on the net. And this is with the supposedly investigative journalist Whitney Webb. It is, I think, more than 3 hours. Yeah, so more than 3 hours interview. It has a lot of data, and the reason why journalists are journalists don't won't let Maria talk about some of the most important pieces of information related to Jeffrey Epstein is because she mentioned that behind this, the whole scheme is Leslie Wexner, and she is Jewish mafia. You can hear that in these two parts of the interview, and that the one who protected Ghislaine Maxwell, her father was working for military intelligence of Israel, so not Mossad, but military intelligence, and the one who was protecting Ghislaine Maxwell, and probably her father, her whole family, is that a jeweler called Rothschild, so it's not Rothschild, it's Rothschild. This is how it should be pronounced. So the people who supported that war I mentioned, illegal war against Serbia, bombing and so on, they are now experiencing the same thing. They experienced the same thing, not knowing that. Most of them didn't know what's happening. So Jeffrey Epstein became main story in 2019, and they're still experiencing because the same thing, because as I just showed, journalists simply refuse to talk about who is really behind the scandal. So and of course, by doing that, they are enabling all those co-conspirators to get away with what they did. So they are also guilty as Epstein, Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell are guilty. And the other thing that they are also experiencing, of course, way more frightening and way more disturbing, because a lot of people died, is a pandemic, which is directly caused by Abstinence Scandal. I will explain that in a separate video. Why is elite so afraid of Abstinence Scandal? They're extremely afraid of that scandal because you see a lot of huge number of psyops or planned scandals and crises within an extremely short period of time. So that started happening after Epstein was arrested for the second time, so in 2019. And the main conspirator behind pandemic, except for the doctors, are journalists so media and the other people, especially from Western and Western European countries. I'm following what's happening. For instance, in Australia, they're experiencing what manipulation or media manipulation means in the most terrifying way. So I hope they will learn the lesson for next time, if there's going to be next time. Okay, so I'm now going to play these videos. So first I will play these 3 videos, some important parts, and I will so this is that scene, and I will stop when something needs to be commented.
In the heart of Europe, thousands of Arab fighters. Zenica, 1995. They'd come to wage holy war in support of the Bosnian army. Their commanders had bigger plans. The Bosnian president, Alija Izetbegović, had formed a local, purely Muslim brigade. He then allowed into the country up to 6,000 foreign Muslims, mostly from the Middle East. Some mixed into the Muslim brigade. Some fought in their own unit called the Mujahideen. They committed many atrocities. The tapes Sky News have obtained include beheadings and signs of torture.
But for some reason Sky News don't want to show that.
Their headquarters was this ruined factory, a fearsome place then. Memories die hard. Our approach was viewed with great suspicion. We've been refused permission to film, our car number plates have been noted down, and the guards are already on their mobiles. This is a story a lot of people don't want to be told. And why? It's because of the hundreds of Mujahideen who used to be down there. Well, some of them are still round here. Our information is that at least dozens of Mujahideen, possibly hundreds, stayed on. Some hung up their Kalashnikovs, but not all.
For certain reasons.
British citizen Benjamin Zaffarani stayed on using his fake Italian passport. He was shot dead in Zenica in March '97, carrying out a robbery to raise funds for jihad. We think he's buried in the village of Meherici along.
So it says here it's Zenica, which is a city in so Zenica, city in Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Along with many other Mujahideen. We began filming. The villagers were so hostile we stopped. This isn't just about history, it's about now. Documents passed to us indicate the scale of the problem. Sky News has obtained several documents marked top secret, amongst them this, which lists 1,700 names of Mujahideen fighters. There are dozens of Saudis, Yemenis, Egyptians, and among them there are 5 Britons. For example, Sehid Jasir, Ingleska, which means English, Boginho, which means killed in action. And here another Ingleska, Muhammad Aisa. Other names marked as English are Abu Qutayba Asim, Abu Khalid Abdul Razak, and Abdul Kelik Abdul Qudus. These pages show the names of several hundred Mujahideen who were given Bosnian passports after the war, and that they changed their names. For example, Abdullah Khalid becomes Klokic. Western intelligence agencies are now pressing the Bosnians to look into exactly where these people are and what they're doing. And asking, have any of these men been in contact with the 3 young Bosnian Muslims arrested last month on terrorism charges? Firearms, explosives, and a suicide video confession was seized. The youths are being held in this Sarajevo jail. There have been 7 connected arrests made in Sweden.
People had this type of munitions, they had explosives.
This version of Islam includes lipstick and beer, but it wasn't just fighters that infiltrated in '95, it was ideas. In the shadow of the war-scarred apartment blocks has risen the country's biggest mosque, the King Faisal Al Saud, built with Saudi money. This mosque has nothing to do with terrorism, but it does expound the radical Saudi Wahhabi Islam, which elsewhere has been interpreted as calling for jihad. In Sarajevo now, the influence of Saudi ideas can be found all over the city. Until the Wahhabis arrived, you couldn't find Bosnian Muslims sporting beards like this, wearing clothes like these, or believing ideas such as those leading to the arrest of the young local men. Radical Islam is attempting to plant deep roots in the community, even if it's an uphill battle. This side of Bosnia far more represents where the country is, both geographically and culturally. But the seeds for change were planted back in '95. The war brutalized a generation. These are Bosnian Muslim forces desecrating an Orthodox church. Here we see a Bosnian Serb being interrogated. He knows his fate. We see him later partially beheaded.
So this is the most important part regarding this footage. So he just said that it can be seen later that he's partially beheaded, but it's not really what happened. And for some reasons Sky News avoided showing this. I don't know what is really the reason. They should be objective. So let's continue with I think there are 2 more important parts of this video.
The Bosnian Muslims didn't need much encouragement to commit atrocities. All sides were engaged in the practice. But the foreign fighters brought with them a new world view, jihad.
So he said here, "Daj mi nož," which means "give me the knife." Probably somebody taught him Serbian language. Basis of it. And this is also, at least here in Serbia, one of the quoted popular clips where it is clearly seen what those jihad fighters did in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So I don't know if it is shown here, but it will be shown in other in one of these 2 videos what this guy did.
Here, an Arab man tries to persuade his Bosnian colleagues to let him kill Serb prisoners. Eventually, he leads them off to their deaths. There were some serious players sent to Bosnia, among them the man who planned 9/11, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, and Abu Suleiman al-Maki, here on the right of Osama bin Laden. One reason he's sitting down, he was shot in the legs in Bosnia. British Muslim convert Andrew Rao, jailed this year on terrorism charges, was also in Bosnia in the mid-90s. Bosnian Serb Police headquarters has been tracking the jihadists. Officers here, many of whom fought against the Mujahideen, believe vital years were lost after the war because there was no unified force covering the whole country. They claim the long-term aim is the radicalization of the whole region's Muslims.
The main aim for Europe.
The Mujahideen video shows their flag planted in Bosnia and speaks of spreading their jihad. At the end of the war, many of these men marched off to other conflicts. They tried to use Bosnia as a launching pad. So far, they've failed. But Bosnia is a useful place to hide, plan and move. It's why some stayed on. Tim Marshall, Sky News, Central Bosnia.
So that was Tim Marshall. Now let's move to another video. So again, this is a Serbian television production, Serbian state television. This means radio television of Serbia. So first channel, first. There are two, I think there were three, but one is cancelled. So let's see, there are 6 segments here, okay.
Gdje je taj zarobljen?
Ovaj zarobljenik je rezervni zastavnik Rade Rogić iz Sanskog mosta.
So the commentator said that this guy is a Serbian soldier in reserve, Rade Rogić, and you will see here. So they are recording after they occupied this. I think this is some village, and we will see part where he lies dead, but we won't see what really happened to him. That is how they murdered him.
Njega su 16. septembra 1995. godine zarobili pripadnici zloglasnog bataljona Hamze.
On, gospodin Čedo, ne mora živ nikako. Ja će biti, hoće ovi tebi. Ne mora živ. Hajde, reći Allah hoće. Ne. Salam alaikum, narode. Brate, on bil ga jebem u nanu. Jebem, brate, ko si. Jebem li mu nanu. Koji je to? To ga je baza 300. Hada, ne bi. Sada otvori.
So it is important to mark this part when they are simply stopped. So this is not the end of the footage. You will see in the next video. So they did it on purpose, and the reason why they did it, I will go back to this part, but I want to show why they did it. And in order to do this, I will need to show one article. So this is article, this is the address, and it says here that NGO, so-called sector in Serbia, some non-governmental organizations, their sector in Serbia are basically the descendants of communists, so communist regime. This is why I said that Serbia is still occupied by communists, so Satanists. They are communists or Satanists. This is why they have a 5-star as their sign. Actually, pentagram. Sorry, this is pentagram. Her her sign is pentagram or mark. They had it on their caps. So this guy is expert in security and defense, and Darko Trifunovic. So he found out that all these mostly women who are leading NGO sector in Serbia are not any descendants of the communists, but descendants of highest ranking officers of communist regime. After that was regime from after Second World War. So let's see the next page. So she's half Tsigani, very mean. She is involved in that scandal with supposedly burying Albanians or Shqiptars here in Serbia murdered. That was all staged. She's very, very mean. So then this monster, Sonja Licht, she's a Jewish general. Her father was general, colonel. This guy was also a partisan, so communist. So father of those Vesna Pešić. She was opposition during the Milošević fall. She is also some center for investigating something, I don't know, human rights, something like that. Then this monster, Sonja Biserko, she's daughter of the colonel of Secret Service, Communist Secret Service. Then this monster, Latinka Perović, she's not the daughter of any Communist colonel or high officer, but she was working for Secret Service. Then this monster, she died, Borka Pavićević, daughter of Communist general. Then this Stasha Zajević, sorry, she's a leader of so-called women in black. This is how they're called. So she's from Montenegro. So she's daughter of a commie who was leading the shooting of all the people from Belgrade after they liberated, quoted, Serbia. Actually, they haven't liberated Serbia. Russians did that. I explained that in another video why that happened. Then Olivera Kovačević, she's important for this story, for this topic. Daughter of Comi General. And finally Maja Žeželj. They are both journalists, but they are involved in, obviously, in NGO. She is involved with IPEX. I think this is the name of that organization, of course, Western or Western European funded by foreign government. And she's probably, but I wasn't able to find. I mean, she's anti-Serbian. She was anti-Serbian and is still anti-Serbian during her whole career. Both of these monsters are daughters of comic generals. And I will show.
Nijedan činjenični svjedok.
So I will show. So that's her. So Olivera Kovačević. And of course she's the major figure on this state television. They practically occupied state television, communists and their descendants. Okay, so let's see where we stopped. Okay, what's next? 1809. The second. No, I haven't missed it, but so this is very important. 1331. Okay, so here will be shown interrogation of an old man. I think he's more than something like 90, between 80 and 90 years old, and you will see what happened after that. So these are Boston Muslims.
Milana Nedimovića, starca iz Jasenice, Duda.
So that poor old man is his name was Milan Nedimović. You will see what happened to him.
Kovićevi vojnici su zlostavljali i ubili. Leš su onda vukli traktorom.
And why is this important? All of this because none of this, nothing was shown in major, was not shown by major news agencies in the West and in the Western Europe.
Godište 19. Ja to upravo kako je došao? Nije nikad. Pa vidiš, to je armija Bosne i Hercegovine. Znam, naš. Ovaj tu sve preživi.
So this poor old man was born in 1919. And this is how he ended up. So this is war crime in a place called Rujevac, and it's committed by military unit called Hamze and Black Mambas. Mamba, I think. So this is the snake just want to be sure that I
Mamba.
Mamba, yeah. So snake. So African snake, you will see on their sleeve that sign of their unit, so military unit, I don't know, they're probably paramilitary. So Bosnian Muslims. This happened in 8th of August 1995.
Ljudi su tjerani na livade koje su bile pokošene i tu je počelo razdvajanje muškaraca i žena i djece. Ko je imao sreću da se dočepa obližnje šume?
So as you saw, these were civilians, and they, it can be heard later that they started killing them. They were refugees, actually.
Prema podacima Dokumentaciono-informacionog centra Veritas, tom prilikom stradalo je 67 ljudi, od toga 43 civila. U mjestu Ćorkovača na granici Hrvatske i Bosne i Hercegovine, na Koti Hleb, pripadnici bataljona Hamze zarobili su početkom avgusta 1995. godine četvoricu rezervista Vojske Republike Srpske Krajine, Mirka Devetaka, Radu Stamboliju, Peru Boromisa i Branka Bašića i posle maltretiranja likvidirali. Likvidaciju je izvršio Teufik El Harbi iz Saudijske Arabije.
So you can hear this part when the commentator said this name of this monster is Teufik El Harti, something like that, from Saudi Arabia, I think that he said.
Bataljona Hamze zarobili su početkom avgusta 1995. godine četvoricu rezervista Vojske Republike Srpske Krajine, Mirka Devetaka, Radu Stamboliju, Peru Boromisa i Branka Bašića i posle maltretiranja likvidirali. Likvidaciju je izvršio Teufik El Harbi iz Saudijske Arabije.
So El Harbi doesn't sound like a surname of somebody who's from Saudi Arabia. He probably changed it. So these are again Hamze, Bosnian Muslims military unit, and again you can hear that he's asking for the knife. He murdered those 4 people, so those were Serbian military in reserve who were captured. And I think this is the only documentary where you have the actual names of these poor people who are murdered. In the other documentaries with the same footage, there's no mentioning of their names.
Za ovaj zločin sud Bosne i Hercegovine osudio je šefika Alića, pomoćnika komandanta bataljona, na 8 godina zatvora, jer nije sprečio ubistvo zarobljenika, već ih je pre likvidacije i sam maltretirao i udarao. El Harbi je posle rata jedno vreme živeo u Bihaću, a zatim nestao.
Joj, me što radi, jebijem.
Koga mi sin kad je ovdje? Gdje on kad je? On pristao kad je ovdje.
U napuštenom punktu.
So he asked the guy with the camera to come with him and to record how he murdered those guys, those poor people, and he was living that monster from Saudi Arabia. He was living in Bihać. This is the city in Bosnia and Herzegovina. For some time, then he disappeared, as the commentator here said. By the way, this is all done by under the command of a guy, Bosnian Muslim commander, Ati Dudaković. He'll be shown later.
Profora u selu Kotarani kod Dvora, 10 kilometara od mesta gde su ubijena 4 rezervista Vojske Republike Srpska Krajina, pripadnici 5. korpusa ubili su 8 Srba.
Daj bombe, moj! Allahu Akbar! Ajde, napolje, jebeo mater! Četniku! Vas nosima tamo, sine, vrži ja tamo. Ajmo, izlazi vani! Ajde! Ajmo, ubi i to! Ubi!
Došao sam do podataka da je to Trivanović Milorad iz sela Zut, koji nije...
So that was a war prisoner, cold blood, murdered in cold blood.
Sa porodicom krenuo u egzodus, nego se on išao je do svojih rođaka u Kotarane, u selo Kotarane. Tu su ga zarobili pripadnici 505. Bužinske i doveli do toga punkta Umprofora.
So according to what this guy just said, that poor guy who was murdered was not even a soldier. He was he didn't want to go with the rest of the refugees. He went to his cousins, and then they captured him there. So here is that guy Ati Dudaković, and you will just see what he did, what he's doing.
Civilnog stanovništva, bošnjačke nacionalnosti i pripadnika jedinica autonomne pokrajine Zapadna Bosna. Vojnici 5. korpusa ušli su u selo Izačić kod Bihaća 9. jula 1994. godine i ubili pripadnike snaga narodne odbrane Zapadna Bosna.
Što? Znaš šta kaže? Veli jebe on, veli, svetu neđe, ja vam pravim državu. A, to je. Pa koji je ovo? Rom. A to je Srbi, to je Četnik. A, to je sve što treba. Srbi, živja. Gotovo. Ti moji. Takbir! Takbir! Ko je taj? Gospodin Rođe. Hrvat! Gotovo. Ajmo ovako. To je Mujo, smečka. Dobro, muđe. Gdje su dva zarobljenika ta? Odmah su. Streljat na licu mjesta.
So most of these people were actually Muslims who wanted to have their separate state or region. The ones who were murdered, killed, and one of them was, I think, Serb, or two of them were Serbs. And you can hear when he said here, so this guy, Atif. This is the guy when he said, when he asked where are those two prisoners, and then after that he said kill them right away. So shoot them on sight. So commander, let's see if there is something interesting here. Nothing. And then so again this guy, Commander Akif Dudakovic, and this is the end of that footage. Then there was a debate and so on and so on. What is interesting to mention here, so this guy is president of the organization for protecting the missing people and finding the missing people and taking care of their families. And it is really strange that he did nothing about this part where the footage was interrupted when this guy was murdered. They murdered him by hitting his head against the rock. Maybe they edited this debate, I mean that part, that footage afterwards, but anyways, he probably watched it later, this version. So and obviously I haven't heard that he was complaining about that. I'm sorry if I missed that part. So it was his job to complain about that. I'm sure that he knows because he knows everything what happened. It's his job. So I'm sure that he knows what is the complete footage and what is that sort of redacted footage. Okay, so I'll move to the last part of this last part of the first part, okay, of the topic related to to that poor guy whose footage is not fully shown, so I will now play and stop when I reach that part when they murdered that poor guy. So that was the part of desecrating Orthodox Serbian Church, Orthodox Christian Serbian Church. That was also shown, as you remember, in this documentary of Sky News. And the next is the part where this poor guy is murdered. First interrogation, then murder. So here it is. This is the most important part here, the most important segment, and pay attention what will happen now. And some more footage on what jihad fighters did in Bosnia. This is some of these scenes are shown in documentary two. There are actually two documentaries. I mentioned them in one of videos I already uploaded. So the name of first documentary is, so this is I think the guys are from Norway. So those people who created that documentary, name of the first documentary is Srebrenica, the town betrayed, and the name of the second documentary is Sarajevo Ricochet or Ricochet. I talked about those two documentaries in other videos, but I will mention them in other video which I'm about to create regarding the jihadi or jihad fighters. And now I will play this. So these are very disturbing images. So these are all Serbs, and you can see here two kids. There's some data here, but I don't see names. I don't see their names. And again, okay, this is I don't know when it is recorded, but this is a third part out of 7. Most of this video is debate on what's happened, and this is the part which contains this third part, which contains the most of the pictures and videos. So out of 17 victims, civilians, 4 were kids from 16 months to 13 years. Most of these are mass graves, and most of these people were murdered by a lot of them were murdered by jihadi fighters from Saudi Arabia and other Arab countries.
Strašno je gledati ove snimke, zaista. Kažete, kako vi to komentarišete?
Pa svaki zločin je strašno gledati, nažalost.
This is the author of this lady, of this documentary, actually sort of interview debate. I'll try to find some picture of her, some good angle. So Milijana Baletić, this is her channel. Okay, the rest is debate. I don't know if there is some part missing. So So 7. Okay, I mean, I will need to check out if there is something, some other videos here. If there are some other videos here, pictures or something like that. So again, debate. Yeah, so this is the same thing. Here is the part with the church. So this is probably the same video material. So Serbian fighters had red band around their heads, and Bosnian Muslims in Bosnia and Herzegovina during the war, they had green, because that's their color. So green band around their head. So this is okay, then now it's the same thing, I don't know why. So they showed again the same thing, I don't know why they did that. So that was the last part, this is the first part.
Ne treba nešto baš biti posebno obrazovan što se tiče prava i pravnih normi.
So again, the debate. Well, they're basically showing the same footage over and over again, probably discussing from different point of view. This guy is some sort of expert in terrorism. So this guy in white suit. Okay. Sixth part. The same documentary again. Yeah. So the same thing. Oh. Okay, I wanted to see if there are some other interesting videos on her channel, but anyways, because I remember that she has a lot of other series or documentaries or debates or interviews, but some of them are removed, some parts are removed as far as I remember. So I wanted to double check that, but never mind. So again, as I said at the beginning, so this is a video by some organization, Truth in Journalism. This is actually a project, probably done by sort of investigative journalists, and I will just play these two segments, and this is the rest. So if someone wants to watch, these are also some interesting parts. Although I mean there are some valuable information here which are not even in this huge documentary. It is almost 3 hours, because it's around 9 minutes, between 9 and 10 minutes, and there are 18 parts of it here. The version I have is well, actually, let's see. 9. So 180 minus around, well, I don't know, I mean like 15 minutes, but that's it. I have the full version. So not this with 18 parts, but I have the full version. So that's it. So this is around based on the timings, this is around 2 hours and 45 minutes. So what I'm about to show here first, okay, this is about those extremists, about those extremists, again those kids, and this is something that's also shown here, but I don't know if I'm going to show this segment from both documentaries, because in general this part is a rip-off, obviously, because it's 26 minutes and this is almost 3 hours. So, but I want to show that they miss some very, very important information. And I think this is about, this is about breadline so-called massacre. Okay, maybe I will even come to this part, but I will move it here. So first off, 0.53 seconds.
On May 27th, 1992, a murderous, contrived incident helped mislead the entire world about the civil war in Bosnia.
Blood was pouring down the main street of Sarajevo today. At least 20 men, women, and children were killed, more than 100 wounded, as shells rained down on civilians in the capital of Bosnia. The atrocity by Serbian troops sparked new calls for foreign help for the helpless in Bosnia.
The whole world had a close look at the horror of the explosion on Vasa Miskin Street almost immediately after it occurred. The U.S. State Department wasted no time in blaming the Serbs for the incident.
Muslims are being killed in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and this government has tried to demonstrate to the Muslim world we care about that and want to try to do something about it.
But were the Serbs really responsible? A classified report by UN General Satish Nambiar pointed to Muslim forces loyal to Bosnian President Alija Izetbegovic as responsible for staging the Breadline massacre, not Serbian mortar shells.
So it is important to note here that the one who is responsible for this were actually terrorist group, paramilitary group of Bosnian Muslims called Sheve or Larks. The guy, ex-NSA, talked about that with a lot of details in the documentary I mentioned. So, documentary that these guys, investigative journalists from Norway, created. So it is called again Srebrenica, Town Betrayed, and Sarajevo Ricochet. So that guy, ex-NSA, he is in both of those two documentaries. Both in these two documentaries.
We believe it was a command-detonated explosion, probably in a can, a UN official told the London Daily Independent 3 months after the explosion.
And the nature of the wounds of the victims was not consistent with mortar wounds. They would have been blown to bits by a near hit, but these people were apparently hit from the waist down. This is more consistent with an anti-personnel mine, which could be detonated just a few yards away.
There were suspicions because the media happened to be there. The street had been closed off, then it was open, the bread line formed, and then there was an explosion.
An eyewitness reported that the television crew and ambulances were on the scene at least half an hour before the explosion occurred. The propaganda success of this bloody massacre encouraged Muslim leaders in Bosnia to arrange what the London Independent called a litany of gruesome events, which were then blamed on the Serbs. These included the killing of American TV producer David Kaplan from the...
Okay, so this is the first part. The second part is about those extremists, foreign extremists, 17 1721.
That adorned death camps, such as Jasenovats in World War II. The BBC documentary Inside Story followed the activities of these black shirts of the 1990s, who were fighting on the Croatian side in Croatia and in Bosnia-Herzegovina.
The bloody Yugoslavian civil war has become a magnet for many men attracted to violence.
I've always wanted to kill legally. You know, have that feeling. You know, take people out. We just want to kill. We just want to get people.
But as the BBC segment Dogs of War reveals, these mercenaries did more than kill. They played a crucial role in the coordinated disinformation effort against the Serbs.
No, none of this one.
Kit's company have been secretly setting off explosions in their own city. It's an attempt to deceive European community officials monitoring the ceasefire. When both sides begin real bombardments, the monitors will assume it's the Serbs who fired first.
Okay, so something off the topic. You saw that while this guy was talking, where was that? So this was not picked up at all by the auto translator. Okay, so again, although this is a really short documentary on the topic, it contains some useful information. So I will now play the other video to compare it. So again, this is called Avoidable War, created by independent journalists. Probably the most comprehensive on the civil war in former Yugoslavia. So Bosnia, actually first Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Kosovo and Metohija.
While some French intellectuals were hailing Croatia as part of the new Europe, old and familiar forces were at work. Osijek became a magnet for neo-fascist groups fighting with Glavaš. They included British skinheads, German and Austrian neo-fascists, and followers of the French extremist Jean-Marie Le Pen.
C'est comme ça que l'on bâtit l'Europe nationaliste.
Et vous y allez directement après, demain
Oui, demain nous partons pour Zagreb pour prendre des ordres à l'état-major, mais pas de l'armée croate régulière. Nous allons avec la force de défense croate qui dépend du parti du droit croate, et donc nous partirons quelque part sur le front en Slavonie, je suppose.
The United States, which soon adopted Germany's approach to the Balkans, ignored recent history and offered a simple explanation for the fighting which broke out in the predominantly Serbian region of Croatia, which was known as the Krajina.
Okay, so you saw here that there are way more information on who these extremists, so foreign extremists, were. It was not just in Bosnia and Herzegovina, those jihadi fighters, but it was also in Croatia. There was a documentary, Chris the Swiss, I think. Yeah, about one of these mercenaries, and it has something to do with Opus Dei and so on and so on. So attracted by war activities. I mean, come on. It's a Croatian army. He was fighting for Croatians. But there was part of Opus Dei. Okay, I'll need to increase the Swiss Opus Dei. I hope I pronounced it correctly. Yeah, here it is. So, who are these people from Opus Dei? So, ultra-conservative Catholic organization Opus Dei. Just to mention who was behind this. Okay, so this is not Krainer, it's Kraina. If you add U, you will have Ukraine, which is Ukraine in Serbia. This is why people are calling Serbs and we are calling each other brothers. So Serbs and Russians are brothers, so not these Russians who are mixed with Asians. Anyways, so so much for ultra extremists. And this is no part about that bread line.
The most important propaganda success for the Izetbegovic government took place on May 27th, just 3 days before a scheduled vote on sanctions against Serbia.
Blood was pouring down the main street of Sarajevo today. At least 20 men, women, and children were killed, more than 100 wounded, as shells rained down on civilians in the capital of Bosnia. The atrocity by Serbian troops sparked new calls for foreign help for the helpless in Bosnia.
Footage of this bloody event from Sarajevo's government-controlled TV station was provided to international news organizations almost immediately after it had happened. Before any investigation had been attempted, Serbs were declared responsible by news organizations from New York to Tokyo. The U.S. government, which was sponsoring a resolution in the UN Security Council to impose sanctions on Serbia, was particularly interested in blaming the Serbs.
Muslims are being killed in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and this government has tried to demonstrate to the Muslim world we care about that and want to try to do something about it.
But were the Serbs really responsible? A wealth of evidence suggests otherwise. To begin with, Serb leaders were desperately trying to prevent a vote on sanctions and had persuaded Russian Foreign Minister Andrei Kozyrev to negotiate a ceasefire the day before the Breadline massacre. Indeed, no shelling had been reported that day by the UN until the marketplace explosion. More importantly, the physical evidence failed to confirm the initial reports of a Serbian mortar shell. Dr. Borisa Starovic, the dean of the Sarajevo Medical Faculty, who treated victims of the Breadline massacre, wrote later in the American journal Chronicles, quote, "I found it very odd that there were no lacerations or puncture wounds on any of the victims. Neither were there any head or chest wounds, only trauma to the lower extremities. The wounds were obviously not caused by artillery shells. They were the result of pre-planted demolition charges." A classified report by UN Commander Satish Nambiar to UN headquarters in New York, obtained by the London Independent 3 months later, stated that the Breadline massacre and a number of other bloody incidents had in fact been linked to Muslim forces loyal to Alija Izetbegovic. Other details confirming a staged incident began to emerge as witnesses came forward. The announcement of free bread had been broadcast 5 times the previous day on the Muslim radio station Hayat. But when the crowd gathered the following day, they were left waiting for bread that never arrived, while Muslim officials blocked off the street according to witnesses who were standing in the breadline.
Bile su pripremljena i sanitetska kola i
So she was standing in the breadline. They haven't mentioned that in that other video by that project, journalist project. And of course there are a lot of way more data than it is in that other video.
I televizijska i to je sve bilo režirano.
Witnesses also observed a two-person television crew taking cover in a nearby doorway, the entrance to the publishing company Svietlost, just before the explosion in the breadline. They were in position to film the gruesome scene almost immediately.
There were suspicions because the media happened to be there. The street had been closed off, then it was open, the bread line formed, and then there was an explosion.
In fact, 3 major staged incidents would take place in marketplaces within a 2-block radius of the breadline bombing. Each would affect the international response to the war in Bosnia.
We've found in this particular conflict that these incidents occur invariably before a major decision is due to be made by the United Nations, by the European community, or by within the peace talks and something of that nature. So what we have is an incident in which a number of Muslims get killed, the Serbs are blamed, the peace process breaks down. So peace accords are never reached because there is always this incident to break up the momentum. Now, the Serbs have continually got the blame for this. The United Nations has continually responded by saying that these are staged incidents, but the United Nations report doesn't get the same impact as the original event.
Sanctions against Serbia would have an effect opposite of what the U.S.
Okay, so that was about the breadline so-called massacre. And this is something that's also shown in that other video by the journalist project, but here is given in way more details. So I'll play it now.
The press would have us believe that the Serbs have seized 2/3 of Bosnia. The fact is the Serbs have lived in that territory for 1,500 years. Another fact is they are farmers and they are spread all over the landscape, so they have always been on 2/3 of the landscape.
The statement that has become an absolute cliche that the Serbs have taken over.
So 1,500 years. 1,500 years. It says in this documentary, this lecture, I think there is somewhere where it says 300 years. Yeah, it says here 300 years. This is the second part, 701. I will need to check out this. Definitely. I don't know if my mic was on, but just to
70% about.
So 1,500 years, and it says in another medieval presentation lecture, it said 300 years, so I will need to check out this. And I'm sorry if I already said that, but I'm not sure if my mic was on. So let's continue with the rest of this segment.
They are spread all over the land.
Cliché that the Serbs have taken over 70% of Bosnia. Again, the underlying assumption is that there were no Serbs in Bosnia before the conflict started, when in reality, much of the land of Bosnia was Serb land before the fighting ever began. But the implication is that the Serbs dropped in from some other planet and just took over nearly 2/3 of the country.
Based on what he now calls highly biased reporting, Kenny became a hardline critic of the Bosnian Serbs, whom he considered aggressors. In an influential opinion column in the New York Times, Kenny and U.S. Air Force General Michael Dugan argued that Bosnian Serbs should be bombed by NATO.
I personally was responsible for perhaps one of the most important things that the State Department did, labeling what was going on ethnic cleansing. I had tried to gin up public opinion, and part of my job was to draft material for the spokesman, Margaret Tutwiler. And she was always looking for inflammatory material. But in any case, my colleague in Belgrade sent me a cable one day saying the Serbs were doing what they described as ethnic cleansing. I thought, okay, this is great. I'll put this into Margaret Tutwiler's noon briefing. And to my surprise, no senior official took the words out.
The aggressors and extremists pursue a policy.
So I really cannot stand this moron, an idiot. Anyways, that guy, Kinney, right? He's very important to the story on media manipulation. Yeah, Kinney. So he's also mentioned here in this lecture. Here he is. Okay, let's see if there is something else left. Yeah. So I'm done with this. Oh, again, this is if anybody wants to know what really happened during that war, staged war. So this is called, that doctrine is called the low intensity conflict. And if somebody really wants to know what happened, then that person need to at least watch this documentary, so around 3 hours, called Yugoslavia, the Avoidable War, and of course all these other documentaries that I showed here. So I need also to mention another one which is strictly related to civil war in Kosovo. I won't play it because it's in German. So this is Gerkar Schreder. He was a major player in this propaganda and the manipulation during that war, in civil war in Kosovo and Metohija, and the other even bigger player than he is and of course Jamie Shea or Shea or whatever it's pronounced. So the other guy who is more prominent in that manipulation is this guy. So Rudolf Scharping, and I of course checked out, so popped eye Rudolf Scharping. You can see that he is a major manipulator here, and of course this Jamie guy. I think, yeah, here he is again. Scharping.
Von Pristina ein Konzentrationslager eingerichtet wird. Wenn ich höre, dass man die Eltern und die Lehrer von Kindern zusammen.
Just look his eyes. He's now talking about concentration camps and murdering children and so on and so on in Kosovo and Metohija. Of course, Albanian children. So, of course, for anyone who's into genetics, he's obviously an incestoid. He's here again, talking nonsense and rubbish again. And this is the guy whose report was manipulated. These are the pictures. Again, shopping. Again. And these other people basically are talking against him, against what he was. They're talking how he manipulated the public opinion, international public opinion. So I'll play only the most important parts, the most interesting parts, but of course there are a lot of data here, a lot of pictures, a lot of information. So probably there is something that's not even in that a long documentary that I just showed. So avoidable war. So I will now play this.
And whereas Yugoslavia and the Serbs got the blame for destroying Yugoslavia and starting the wars, in reality it was the current Croatian president, Stipe Mesic, who was the last rotational president of Yugoslavia, who ordered the Yugoslav army to shell Dubrovnik, his own home republic. After he accomplished that, he went back to Croatia and said, "My mission is accomplished, Yugoslavia is no more." It should also be noted that he was an agent of the German BND Secret Service. This is perhaps the most famous photograph and most impacting image of the war in the Balkans, which changed many minds and much of public opinion. As my former mentor and editor Gregory Copley noted, the misleading photograph of a consumptively ill prisoner of war in a Bosnian Serb camp deliberately forced the incorrect impression that the Serbs were running their camp like Nazi concentration camps. That snapshot helped sway more foreign opinion than any other single image. Thomas Diekman of Novo and LM magazines wrote, "The British reporters who entered the Bosnian Serb-run Ternpolje camp on 5th of August 92, Penny Marshall and Ed Viljami."
So it's actually Deichmann.
"Have always insisted they give a straight eyewitness account of all they saw there. The image of Fikret Alic, imprisoned behind barbed wire, was misleading for the simple reason that it was not the Bosnian Muslims who were encircled by the barbed wire, but the British journalists themselves. Marshall's team took those pictures from inside a small agricultural compound which was ringed by a barbed wire fence erected long before the war. But by filming Fikret Alic and the others through the barbed wire of the compound fence, the British news team came away with pictures that the world wrongly interpreted as evidence of concentration camps in Bosnia." Thomas Diekman and Mick Hume of LM magazine were sued by those journalists they exposed, and it went all the way to the British High Court. And the justice of the British High Court, Justice Moreland, said basically that Thomas Diekman and Mick Hume were right, that in fact the journalists did manipulate it by photographing through the barbed wire, but that because Thomas Diekman and Mick Hume could not prove it was their intention, that it was libel. He noted, "Clearly Ian Williams and Penny Marshall and their TV team were mistaken in thinking that the TV crew was not enclosed by the old barbed wire fence." Ian Williams said rather oddly, "I was not knowingly not telling the truth." Thomas summed up, "I am shocked that over the past 4.5 years, none of the journalists involved has told a full story about the barbed wire fence, which made such an impact on world opinion. The photograph has been taken as proof that Turnpolje was a Nazi-style concentration camp, but the journalist knew that it was no such thing. Former director of the Yugoslav desk at the United States State Department was originally very anti-Serb, but when he came to the Balkans to see with his own eyes what was going on, he resigned because of America's very biased anti-Serb policy. He noted from the effect of this kind of biased media coverage, at the start of the week, possible critical policy shifts were dimly perceived and highly tentative, but by week's end, ITN's graphic portrayal of what was interpreted as a Balkan Holocaust probably ensured that those shifts became irreversible. On August 13th, the UN Security Council passed Resolutions 770 and 771, which authorized the international use of force in Bosnia. Lost in the shuffle was any understanding of what was actually going on in the camps, who ran them, and why. Official Washington and the U.S. press almost completely ignored an International Red Cross report issued on August 4th describing ICRC visits to 10 camps and their finding of blatant human rights violations by all sides.
Okay, so that was about that so-called concentration camps, completely staged, and we now should assume that those people, those British journalists, didn't have a translator with them. I mean, this is ridiculous. So another part from the second part of this lecture.
Washington Post and other Western media captioned the left photo as Serbian paramilitaries. But if one looks closely, you see obvious symbols of other groups who had been fighting in the Balkans, such as from the Croatian Šahovnica, or red and white checkerboard, visible on the left-hand soldier's beret and on his colleague's shoulder epaulet. And on the right, we see soldiers of the Croatian Rights Party wearing the Nazi Iron Cross and T-shirts that say Crna Legija, Black Legion of Death. Christopher Morris.
So it is now important to mention when he said Black Legion or Crna Legija. So these were the units of Croatian Nazi in actually Second World War. So I'm showing this is Crna Legija here. Jure Francetic is mentioned here. He was a this is the guy. He was a commander. This is Second World War. He was a commander of that. So this is Al Jazeera. This is good. So he was a commander of that Black Legion. They committed the most monstrous murders. So this was in Croatia, and the reason why I'm showing this, so some massacres of Black Legion. Ustashi striking fists. So Ustashi are Croatian Nazis. Most of them were, most of Croatians were Nazis. So not Croatian Serbs, but Croatians, or Kurbats. So they are Asian tribe. And the reason why I'm showing this is that the former president of Serbia, Boris Tadić, is his mother is cousin of this guy. so he's his uncle. So this is a démenti of his mother. So this is that monster and moron, Boris Tadic, former check out this, former president of Serbia after Milosevic era, after Slobodan Milosevic era, real idiot and moron. I mean, the guy was a psychologist in a high school, and then he suddenly became a president. So the reason, I mean, I explained that in videos on my channel on whore sons and bastards of Serbia who were actually on the highest position, highest political ruling position. Why obviously he's installed by Western and Western European governments and all the other morons, such as current President Slobodan Aleksandar Vučić. He's also related to some of the executioners of Serbs. So the reason why they're installing these people is to these monsters and idiots and stupid. Anyways, the reason why they're installing them is because they want to humiliate Serbia. This is the main reason why they are doing that. So this is his mother, and he's stated here. So this is sort of her démenti. She said that these are all lies about her family, but she said she has some material evidence, like documents and so on and so on, when she was born, her maiden name and so on and so on, but she hasn't provided any. So people claim she was commie, and her husband, all of them were commies in high positions, and she claimed here that she doesn't have anything to do with that guy who was a commander of the most notorious unit of Ustashi Nazi, so Croatian Nazis in Second World War. But again, she didn't provide any evidence, any material evidence. She just said she has material evidence, but she hasn't provided any. Okay, this is also very interesting.
Was taken around by Croatian troops, and they said the body on the upper left was a Croat killed by Serbs. But there's no explanation of the U carved into this victim's forehead, U meaning Ustasha. In other words, he, not knowing the history and cultural and political geography of the region, clearly took them at their word. But when somebody has a U carved on them, it means they were tagged by Croatian extremists, Ustasha, who killed this clearly Serb victim.
So they're not extremists, they're Croatian Nazis. So they were collaborating with Nazis. They were as according to Nazis, they were their best collaborators, and you can see in the video where when Germans are entering Zagreb, so the capital of Croatia, how they are welcoming them. This was in 1941. So they call them liberators.
Einmarsch in Agam. Die kroatische Bevölkerung grüßt ihre deutschen Befreier. Ehrenwaffe am Bild des Führers. Weiter nach Agam. Einmarsch in Agam. Die kroatische Bevölkerung grüßt ihre deutschen Befreier.
So I don't know why he didn't mention that, but anyways, let's continue.
In an interview in Photo District News, Christopher Morris says, for advice for would-be war photographers, the advice I would give is to learn your craft, learn your equipment, learn your film, learn how to technically do what you do very well, plus style, before you go out and really try to do something. And nowhere and no time did he say, learn the history, culture, and political geography of the region so you know what you're doing. Arizona Republic said that these were weeping Kosovo Albanian refugees. They were in fact the family of a slain Serb policeman killed by American-backed Albanian separatist terrorists. Once again, Chicago Tribune, as the Americans apparently are pondering a military role, as if it was not a foregone conclusion at that point, a clearly Serbian woman in a black dress of mourning was leaving a cemetery, and once again they blame the Serb snipers for the killing. When Serbs commit ethnic cleansing, it's genocide. When Muslims commit it, being the official victims, notice the terminology that Newsweek uses with Ron Habib's photos. Forced from home, Serbs are pushed out of their villages by Muslim militiamen whose people have in turn been uprooted by Serbs. So once again, they blame the victim for their victimhood and imply that their ethnic cleansing was gentle. But what neither Newsweek nor Ron Habib said is why so many of these women are wearing the black dress of mourning. In the ruins of their own making, once again, the Serbs are, as victims, responsible for their own victimhood.
Okay, so this was only one of the examples how they manipulated public opinion. So Western and Western European countries, actually they're journalists, and of course they cannot do that without the permission of their government. This is serious stuff. It's international. So okay, and the last part is once again Russell Gordon. So this is something that has to do with the involvement of Jewish people in what's the right word? Forcing that war on actually bombing all of Serbs. So Serbs were bombed during the civil war 2 times, once in Bosnia, so Bosnia and Herzegovina, and the second time was in 1999. So Serbia was bombed over so-called ethnic cleansing now in Kosovo and Metohija. So let's go to this point 416.
on to current events, past history. Some people have accused the Serbs of having their own propaganda, and in 15 years of studying media war, I've only seen one time that they've attempted to misuse or manipulate a photo. On the left it says Serb civilian victims, Bijeljina. They are in fact the family of a Muslim SDA official who were killed by Arkan's tigers. The Bosnian Muslims, Croats, and Kosovo.
So he said Arkan's tigers. So Arkan was a prominent figure during the civil war, but he was not acting alone. He has a paramilitary called Tigers, and it turns out that the one who was controlling him was top of the Serbian or Yugoslavian or Yugoslav state intelligence, and as I already explained, they are controlled by CIA. So this is official data, according to testimony in Hague by Sir Ivor Roberts, former ambassador of UK in Belgrade during the Milosevic era, and he also wrote that in his book, and he had a permission by UK government to write about that. So this is official. So again, this guy Gordon found only one manipulation, and this is something that's done by this guy was obviously about to kick this woman in the head. So even this is something that's was controlled by CIA. So it cannot be blamed on Serbs. So everything that's done, including Srebrenica, which I will show in other videos. So everything was controlled by foreign governments and their intelligence. Again, it's official. These are official data.
Albanians were assisted by the U.S. government in hiring a public relations agency in Washington, D.C. in order to sway U.S. public opinion. And the director of that public relations firm, Reuter Finn, James Harsh, boasted to a French journalist how they did it. He said, "For 18 months we have worked for the Republic of Croatia, the Republic of Bosnia-Herzegovina, and the Albanian opposition in Kosovo. It's very simple. A card index, computer, and fax machine. We are most proud to have succeeded in moving Jewish opinion to our side. The game was extremely delicate and involved a major danger. Croatian President Franjo Tudjman was too imprudent in his book. A reading could find him guilty of anti-Semitism. It was no better on the Bosnian Muslim side since President Ali Izetbegovic in his Islamic declaration grounded himself too firmly in the quest for a Muslim fundamentalist state in Bosnia. Moreover, the past of Croatia and Bosnia were marked by a very real and cruel anti-Semitism. There were all sorts of reasons why Jewish intellectuals and organizations were hostile to the Croats and Bosnian Muslims. Our challenge was to obtain a reversal of this situation, and we succeeded in doing it in a magisterial manner. We outwitted 3 Jewish organizations, the Anti-Defamation League, the American Jewish Committee, and the American Jewish Congress. This really worked. The engagement...
So it's actually not 3, but way more than that, and I will show right after this. I'm finished with this part of the video.
The Jewish organizations on the side of the Muslims was a super poker play. Immediate thereafter, we were able to associate the Serbs with the Nazis in public opinion. In a single shot, we were able to offer a simple story, a history of the good guys and the bad guys. The emotional charge was so powerful in the press that no one could go against it without being accused of historical revisionism. Our work does not consist of verifying information. We are professionals. We had a job to do and we did it. And when the time comes to start a debate on all of this, if you wish to prove that the Serbs are in fact poor victims, go ahead. You'll be quite alone. And this is how Reuter Finn did it. by convincing major Jewish organizations and Jewish members of the American government to take out full-page ads in New York Times and other major American media saying "Stop the death camps" and associating the images and the exaggerated and fabricated reports with the Nazi death camps and the Holocaust. Late Tom Lantos, perhaps one of the best congressmen that money can buy, said, "I very much hope that those horrendous pictures, which are reminiscent to the concentration camps that the Nazis had during World War II, minus the gas chambers, will stir public opinion both in Europe and the United States. Mr. Bush Sr. and his administration has to be dragged kicking and screaming into taking some action."
Okay, so the last part is that, well, I let it play.
The civilized world stood by during the early 40s because it claimed, not quite honestly, that it didn't know what is going on. Well, we know now what is going on. It is on our television screen every night. Again, another supporter of all the separatists in the Balkans, Senator Joseph Lieberman. I thought the tapes were sickening and infuriating because we have seen these emaciated bodies before. We have seen the terror in their eyes. We have seen the beatings. We have seen them in pictures of the Second World War. The only way the Serbs will stop the aggression is to force them to look down a barrel of a gun. I started my investigation by going to interview the three warring communities, diaspora, in a major American city. And here is a meeting I had at a Bosnian Muslim mosque. On the right side is a liberal American Jewish rabbi greeting Imam Senad, who was the leader of this mosque. And notice the body language. The Jewish rabbi steps down off the step, leans forward, smiling, and clasps the imam's hand with both hands, while the imam crosses his body in defensive and deceptive body language and looks away from him. The FBI was investigating the arms smuggling and money laundering that was going on in this mosque, funneling mujahideen to fight on the Muslim side, but they were ordered off the investigation. These are the Department of Justice filings from...
So he didn't mention who ordered them to back off.
Reuter Finn, which show that they represent a foreign government or governments, and it is a blueprint for how they influenced public opinion. It blames Serbia for genocide and aggression and encourages the false belief, victimhood of the other sides, and it lists a veritable who's who in media and government of who they faxed and called and met with in order to influence public opinion and U.S. policy. And here are photos from a Kosovo Albanian separatist website showing three American congressmen, Ben Gilman, the late Tom Lantos, and soon-to-be Vice President Joseph Biden, who had promised them independence and indeed did help them attain that. And the role of Political Action Committee, or PAC money, cannot be underestimated. Here's one example from 1991-92 from Senator Robert Dole from National Albanian PAC Committee. And again, the list goes on of American politicians.
Okay, so I won't show everything because I don't want to have a long video. I don't want it to be too long, so but again there are a lot of information here how the journalists were manipulating the public opinion, and I mean it's not some joke. These are people's lives. So the people were bombed. I mean, I was bombed. I was living here where I live. No, just a second. So I was living in this city when the bombing began. I went for some period of time. I was in country for some period of time, but then I went back here. So I was here when it started, and I was here when it ended. I clearly remember that day when they had that peace agreement. Okay, so the last part, this is the professor, Dr. Mirjana Stojsavljević. He was, she was, I'm a bit tired. So she published some time ago a study, scientific study on what happened in Sarajevo during that murder of Austrian king. So just a second, I need to run. Actually, Archduke Austria-Hungary. So he was assassinated in Sarajevo, which triggered the First World War. He was the heir of the throne of Austria-Hungary, and he was murdered with his wife, who was at that time she was pregnant, and this professor wrote that the one who was behind this were Jews. So it says here Jewish lobby. So they attacked her after that study, and I've no show, because there is a part which has to do with the Jewish organization that are mentioned in previous video, lecture of Mr. Gordon. So he said there were 3 organizations, Jewish organizations, who were lobbying for attacking the Serbs, bombing the Serbs. So, in general, foreign intervention. So, in order to make this as fast as possible, I will just run it through the so this is that part which explains. So she basically wrote the professor Mirjana wrote this to the guy who is I think ambassador of Israel in Israel Katz in Bosnia and Herzegovina. She's from Bosnia and Herzegovina. So her I read her study. I think this is just a part of the one that is published, just a part of the whole study. It's really extraordinary. extraordinary. So I suggest everyone who's interested in First World War to read it. Of course, if that person wants to know what really happened. In short, it turned out that this guy was murdered because he was so-called anti-Semite, right? And they just used his assassination as an excuse to occupy Serbia, and again that triggered First World War. So Serbia is obviously very important in geopolitics. So let's see the translation. So okay. So before the war started, a statement was issued in New York, April 22nd of April 1999. Events in the former Socialist Federative Republic of Yugoslavia, which commemorated the Holocaust. The most important Jewish organization called on the American public joining the U.S. government's plea to stop Serbian barbarism. So next up, they demand embargo on Serbian weapons. Military force be prepared immediately. Air strikes, so bombing, as I said. So Serbian aggression, I mean, it cannot be aggression because, as this guy said in the documentary I played, so most of the Bosnia and Herzegovina was Serbian, and also this is the same thing with Croatia, but it's not mentioned there. So so Serbia could be isolated. We suffered a lot because of this isolation. We didn't have a regular oil supply or stuff like that. It was really terrifying as much as possible. World community, war crimes group, blah blah blah. Okay, so subsequent war crime trials. So they planned at that time, that 1992, that there will be war trials. So this is of course about Hague. So that international court in Hague is illegal. It's under United Nations, and United Nations are a private organization. So the statement was signed, so this is the most important, in the form of a global appeal for salvation from the Serbian barbarism, the judgment, blah, blah, blah. So, the detachment by all world Jewish organizations, so American Jewish Committee, these guys I think mentioned that, American Jewish Congress, also mentioned, Masonic Jewish Organization, Brith, whatever it is pronounced, Anti-Defamation League, Hadassah, Jewish War Veterans, National Council of Jewish Women, the Union of American Jewish Congregations, the Union of Orthodox Jewish Congregations, the United Synagogue for Conservative Judaism, all the way to the Women's League for Conservative Judaism and the Women's American OTR. I don't know what that OTR So it's actually about all the Jewish organizations in the world, and what this excellent scientist, Professor Miriam, wrote in that. I will not find it. I'll find that piece. I think this is just a part of the study. So So they removed it. No, it's here. No, it's not here. They removed it from that site. It's now on other site. Orthodox family. It was on this site, Borba za istinu, Fight for the Truth. Now it's on this site, Orthodox family. So let's see if I can find it like this. Is it .rs? Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's here, but it's not. So it's Google. It's Google. It doesn't show. So it shows it here, but not. But not for this other site. So here it is. So this is about First World War and who was really behind that. So it's a huge article. It's the name of the study was Behind the Walls of the Secrets. And what I want to find. Okay, I need to switch to Serbia. No, it's not here. So I think she mentioned that in one of the interviews. It's about the documents, pictures, and stuff like that, which are stolen. No, it's not here. It's in one of her interviews. So somebody interviewed her, and she mentioned that thing with pictures and documents related to Jasenovac concentration camp during Second World War in Croatia. So around 700,000 Serbs were murdered there. So this is Jasenovac. And during the civil war in the 90s in former Yugoslavia, so Serbian army managed to save all those documents, a lot of pictures of murdering Serbs. I mean, there were also Jewish and Tsigani, so not gypsies but Tsigani murdered there. But most of the victims were Serbs. They were actually murdered in the most monstrous way. There were like 50-something ways of killing, of torturing people. In those, there were a lot of concentration camps at that time, and this Jasenovac was the one of the largest one. So Serbian army collected all those pictures and the documents of Jasenovac, but somebody at that time, it is said that it was somebody, people didn't know who that was, who that person was. So somebody ordered that this was moved to Bosnia. I think it was not, the war didn't start yet in Bosnia at that time. So somebody ordered that, somebody signed that all these data and pictures, documents and pictures should be sent to United States. And they were sent to one of those Jewish museums. They returned it, but there were like 30% of the documents or material missing. And when they returned everything after the war ended, so it was only in microfilm form. And the one who signed that, she was talking about that scandal. So this professor was talking about that scandal in one of her interviews. I mean, actually, this is the only interview I found with her. The only one interview with this extremely good and dedicated, excellent scientist. So the one who signed that, I'm trying to find the, yeah, here it is. So the one who sent those materials to the United States was actually the, I don't know if he's still the president, he was the president of Bosnia and Herzegovina, actually the Republic of Srpska, Serbian part of Bosnia and Herzegovina. So he was the one who did it. And at the time when I was reading about that, I was watching some documentary. It is said that somebody did that. Somebody sent those materials. So obviously very, very extremely valuable to Serbs, to all the Serbs. And later it was discovered that it was him. So this is one of the articles explaining what happened. So it says Dodik sent the materials from Jasenovac to Washington, and then it was sent back to Croatia. So basically they sent it to those monsters who murdered all those people. That was not it was not even a massacre. It was what's the right word in English? It was a satanic ritual. So they're trying to call it now slaughter, so slaughtering, but what that was, it was actually satanic ritual. So there are a lot of videos on what happened Jasenovac and Gradiška and so on. So you just look on concentration camps in Croatia during Second World War. Okay, so I think that this should be all on the manipulating public opinion with a focus on civil war in former Yugoslavia. And I want to mention one more time that this is especially for this video, especially for people who are supporting illegal war against Serbia in the 90s. So again, I hope they will learn something now.